everybody, and this is it was my Mercedes 124 Coupe, a 1988 300 CE. The car has already been sold, and I won't have a chance to film with it anymore after this week. So I decided to make this video before the new owner takes delivery of the car. Before I get into the details of the vehicle, we can go into some history of the 124 platform as a whole. The development of the 124 began in 1977 under Hans Scherenberg, just 2 years after the launch of the previous generation of executive car from Mercedes. According to head of design Bruno Seiko, the 124 carried on a design philosophy implemented with the 126 S-Class, continued with the 201 Compact, and further explored in the 124. This design philosophy would continue through Seiko's entire career as head of design, finally coming to an end with his retirement in 1999 with the new W210 and 203 E-Class and C-Classes. The 210 being the E-Class and the 203 being the C-Class. The body of the 124 was finalized in 1981, and prototypes were made the following year. The car was introduced in 1984 and went on to sell over 2.5 million units in 11 years. The 124 incorporated many novel and forward-thinking options for the time, including 4-wheel ABS, a low-drag body, and optional gas self-leveling suspension in the rear. The 124 was also the first generation to be called the E-Class, receiving the moniker in 1993 after its facelift. It was also the first to introduce the iconic Gullydeckel, or manhole cover wheels. This style of wheel would become ubiquitous to Mercedes throughout the 80s and 90s. The 124 was offered in a wide range of body styles, with the wagon being introduced in 1985, the coupe in 1988 in America, and 1987 in Europe, and the cabriolet in 1992. Typically, only a couple engines were offered in America, being an inline-6 gas or diesel. Later on, V8 models were introduced, however, though the factory V8 was limited to sedans. In Europe, though, a plethora of engine options were available, ranging from humble 4-cylinders to oddball inline-5 diesels, to the powerful V8 options as well. Welcome to the interior of this C-124 coupe. My particular C-124 is a 1988, meaning it's the first year the coupes were offered for the 124 body style. It's a gray leather interior. It's allegedly real leather, but to be perfectly honest, all these Mercedes that I own have the same kind of odd, somewhat synthetic leather feeling. Let's get the door closed here. I can't leave the door closed for too long, as I will probably cook to death in the car if I'm not careful. In terms of instrumentation, it's fairly simple. Starting from the far left, you have a coolant temperature gauge, and going clockwise around that dial, you have your fuel gauge at the top, your oil pressure gauge on the right, and a fuel economy gauge on the bottom. All the fuel economy gauge really does is it's off like a vacuum from the throttle, and that needle moves in respects to your throttle position. It's fairly crude. In the center, you have your speedometer, which optimistically goes to 160 miles an hour. You have your odometer and your trip odometer. And to the right, you have a tachometer and a clock, inexplicably. On the bottom, you have your idiot lamps. From the left to the right, you have your high beams, your battery warning, your parking brake lamp, your brake or ABS lamp, your oil level lamp, or the genie lamp, as I like to call it, your coolant level lamp. In the center, you have a location for a digital thermometer. You have your washer fluid idiot lamp. I assume that one to the right means you have a light out somewhere, and the one to the right, that is your ABS warning lamp, your SRS lamp, and then the check engine light in the far corner. Your controls are fairly simple. You've got headlamps over here with a parking brake below, which is operated by a third pedal in the footwell. You have your switches here. You've got your rear windshield defroster, your headrest lowering switch, recirculation, hazard lights, the radio antenna controls, your dome light switch, temperature for the HVAC, and your switches for the HVAC. You've got your windshield. This is for the head and feet. This is for the feet alone. And this is fan only. And then nothing. And you've got your fan speeds over here. Below that, you have a radio and then an ashtray. Your automatic transmission is a 4-speed. And then finally, you've got your window switches, window lock, and the passenger side mirror controls. This is where the car phone usually would go, but the previous owner has replaced it with a Alpine CD changer. As you can see here, this is your armrest. It has a button on the side that will drop it back seat. And here we are in the rear seats. As you can see, they're fairly spacious, as this was simply modeled off the 4-door. And you can see here the prominent lack of a B-pillar. When both these windows are down, this entire space is open to the air. And you can have the sunroof open as well. It is a dual action sunroof, meaning you've got tilt functionality as well as opening. Here in the center, you've got your ashtray and storage cubby. Allow me to demonstrate the ashtray real quick. Over here, you've got your window controls for the rear window. And behind you, you've got your fold-down armrest. There is no pass-through for skis of any kind. And up here, you have a first aid kit. My first aid kit is still unused and complete. I will not be going through that before I sell the car, unfortunately. If any of you want to see what's inside of a Mercedes first aid kit, both my C-Class and E-Class have the first aid kit intact. So we can go through both of those at a later date. I forgot to mention the glove box. Excuse me a second to get to the front seat again. The reason I mention the glove box is because of what you may not have seen inside of the car so far, and that is your cup holders. This glove box is where your cup holders are contained. As you can see, that is all the cup holder Mercedes decided you would need in a car like this. It also gives you a very convenient picnic table to eat upon. Without further ado, let's move to the underhood area. As you can see here, this is the engine bay. I believe they used this M103 motor until the early 90s, although don't quote me on that, I'm not too sure. But to give you the rundown, the M103 is a 3-liter single overhead cam, 2-valve, inline 6 motor. It utilizes a KE Jetronic fuel injection system, which can be manual or electronic depending if some components fail or not. Over here we have the main coil, the main ignition coil. From there, spark is sent to the distributor, where it is then sent to each individual cylinder. Over here you can see, just below that upper radiator hose, the power steering fluid reservoir. It is unique to this vehicle, as far as I can tell. Well, not unique to this vehicle, it's unique to me. It's the first time I've ever seen a power steering fluid reservoir like that, where it's like a big can and you unscrew the top and you top it up that way. As you can see, the spark plug wires are held down by that plastic piece. On top of the valve cover. I hate it. I really do. There's no good way to rub the wires and make sure they stay down. No matter how good you think you got it, down that first time, it will always rattle off on its own. Up here you can see the air filter hat with the PCV hose. Moving over to here, this is your radiator. Has both an electric fan on the front and a mechanical clutch-driven fan on the back. You can see over here you've got your windshield wiper fluid tank and a coolant reservoir up to the battery at the top there. That dipstick you may be able to see at the very rear of the motor is for your automatic transmission fluid. That dipstick right there is for your oil. The oil filter is conventionally located on the underside of the motor. The M119 V8 in my other E-Class has a oil filter located on the top in a canister style. Up to the top right, you've got your brake master cylinder and fuse panel. You can just about see the upper parts of the strut towers as well. This ancient motor produced a whopping 175 horsepower back in 1988. These cars were most certainly not fast or powerful. They merely looked good, and that was about it. Now let's take you to the trunk of the car. Here it is. This is the trunk. It's truly nothing special. It really is just a trunk of a car. One thing to note is that this was made before the emergency handle was standard on the inside of trunks. So it is very possible to get yourself locked inside of this trunk. As you can see there, that is the Alpine CD changer that the previous owner installed. One interesting thing about these taillights, by the way, is you can see how they're ridged, how they've got indentations. The reason for that is due to snow accumulation. So if it snows, the snow will only accumulate on the ridges, and the taillight will still be visible without having to clear it. So with all that out of the way, let's take it back to a nice wide shot, and we can close in the sounds of nature or some other droning that I may go on about the 124 chassis and all that.